India's most prolific batter. Over 10,000 runs in international cricket, over 20 years of playing for the Indian cricket team. Yet, when the time was right, when she was supposed to play an all-important semi-final versus England in 2018, she was nowhere near the playing 11. This in itself would have been a story, because it was that of a legend who had done so much for the Indian team, yet could not find a place in a playing 11 in a World Cup knockout game. However, in the very words of Mithali Raj, things actually got a lot worse. But not only was she dropped from the squad, she was also asked not to be a part of the team huddle on the day of the semi-final. So how does something like that even happen? To understand everything more clearly, it is important that we have context. The year is 2018, India are gearing up for a T20 World Cup. More importantly, they're also doing extremely well as a side. Because if you take the last 15 games that they play in the lead up to that semi-final in the T20 World Cup, they've got 12 wins and 2 losses. Even better, in the tournament through the group stages, India managed to win every single game, and that included a victory against the mighty Australians. Throughout these games, Mithali Raj was also scoring runs consistently, but with just the one caveat, and that was her strike rate. Because if you look at this period for India and look at their top 5 run getters, Mithali Raj is third on the list. But the moment you have a look at the strike rates, you'll realize why there was a little bit of chatter around this particular topic. It's because although she'd scored 306 runs during this time period, was the third highest scorer, she did this only at a strike rate of 104, lowest by a decent amount. And more importantly, this was a sign of concern because she was a batter who was batting at the top of the order. Especially in a format like T20 where you know that batting is built on tempo, someone like Mithali Raj was viewed by some people potentially as being very slow for the Indian team and for the format. It is no secret that Mithali Raj had been opening the batting for the Indian side for years together. Yet in the tournament opener against New Zealand, where India went on to win that game, she found herself being pushed lower and lower down the order. As per the team management, it had a lot to do with ensuring that there was batting depth even at the fag end of the innings. But clearly it's not something that went down well with one of India's best batters. And it was for this very reason that mid-World Cup, Mithali Raj shot out a mail to then Administrator Sudha Shah. She raised her concerns and ensured that she was in a position where she could open the innings for the Indian team come the next game. And that's also exactly what happened before the Pakistan game, which was the next match itself, where despite the fact that the team management thought it would be better to send Mithali Raj low down the order, she invariably opened the innings versus Pakistan. Of course, looking at it from the outside, these things did seem weird, but much later on we did find out a lot more context about this. In fact, in a message that Ramesh Pawar had written to the BCCI administration, here's what he said. I hope Mithali Raj stops blackmailing, pressurizing coaches, and also stops putting her interests first than the team's. I hope she will look back at the bigger picture and work towards betterment of Indian women's cricket. But let's leave that aside for now and come back to the World Cup itself. In the 2 games that followed, Mithali Raj did open the innings and in fact went on to score runs as well, getting back-to-back 50s versus Pakistan as well as Ireland. She scored 56 of 47 deliveries versus Pakistan with 17 dot balls in the knock. Whereas versus Ireland, she scored 51 of 56, a rather slow knock with 25 dot balls. Objectively looking at both of these innings, they are on the slower side. But the moment you look at the scorecards, you'll realize that at least the Pakistan knock was a sensible one and one with a decent enough strike rate. But the moment you come to the Ireland knock, that's where the problem arises. Although India did go on to win both of these games, there was a clear problem at hand. And this is where the differences seem to arise from. It felt as though there was a tension that nobody in their team management or the senior players could really resolve. It was the fact that Mithali Raj was scoring these runs, but she wasn't doing so quickly or with the intent of scoring quicker. In fact, in a report that Ramesh Pawar had sent to the BCCI regarding this particular situation, he had some really strong claims and points to make. As reported by Cricinfo, there were 4 points that Ramesh Pawar addressed with regards to Mithali Raj. Minimum inputs in team meetings, ignoring her batting role and focusing instead on personal milestones, lack of keeping momentum while batting which put extra pressure on the other batters in the squad, and intent being missing from her batting. But of course, there was also a counter to this by Mithali Raj where she has spoken about how there was no clear communication on the kind of role that she was supposed to play in that squad. She even goes on to claim in an interview that she went on to go and ask Ramesh Pawar what her role was, asking for role clarity around how her batting had to be. But apparently there was no response. Then against Ireland, despite scoring those runs, Raj also suffered a knee injury, which meant that she was going to be out of that game versus Australia. Still, India went on to win that game and in fact do it quite comfortably. It all seemed to be going uphill for the Indian team in terms of their performances in the World Cup, because after that Australia game was England in the semi-final, and at the same time Mithali Raj was also fit once again. Still, Mithali Raj found herself out of the squad for that semi-final versus England. Given everything that had happened till now, if India had actually gone on to win that match against England in the semi-final, maybe it would have been a different story. But that's not what happened, because India at 89 for 2 collapsed and went on to get all out for just 112 versus England. Would it have actually made sense to have Mithali Raj in that playing 11, being a solid anchor through the innings, hopefully holding one end up for the other batters to come and then explode? And that's where within hours of the loss, the conversation shifted completely from India's loss and went on to the Mithali Raj, Ramesh Pawar, Harmanpreet Kaur feud. Because Raj's then manager Anisha Gupta put out a string of tweets, and in these tweets she was attacking captain Harmanpreet Kaur. Although the tweets had been deleted soon after, the damage had already been done. Days later, Mithali Raj herself sent an email to BCCI's top brass. In it, she made really strong claims and claimed that Ramesh Pawar, the head coach, as well as a COA member in Diana Adalji, were looking to destroy her career. She described a pattern wherein she was being ignored, humiliated, sidelined by the coaching staff time and time again. But Ramesh Pawar, being the kind of personality he is, also wasn't one of those to sit quiet, because in a mail that he also addressed days later to the BCCI in response to what Mithali had said, went on to describe how Mithali at times would be blackmailing. He went on to say how she threatened retirement before the Pakistan game in case she was not allowed to open the innings. And clearly this was just the start of a long thread that would just have a lot of back and forth between the players, the coach and the BCCI, and things were just getting ugly. Eventually, to sort things out, Mithali Raj, Harmanpreet Kaur and then COA President Vinod Rai got together in Delhi. But by most accounts and by headlines that were going around, it clearly did not seem to resolve anything at all. And in fact, rather surprisingly, just a day after that meeting took place, Harmanpreet Kaur as well as Smriti Mandhana sent out separate mails to the BCCI as well as the COA. The mails explicitly stated that both Harmanpreet Kaur as well as Smriti Mandhana wanted Ramesh Pawar still to be the Indian coach. Harman in her mail also mentioned that it wasn't solely Ramesh Pawar's decision to drop Mithali Raj from the squad. In fact, according to her, the decision was made collectively. Not only was Ramesh Pawar responsible for it, but also the fact that Harmanpreet Kaur, the vice captain, then Smriti Mandhana, as well as the chief selector and Sudha Shah, all of them had a discussion, and only after that was this call taken. But all of this seemed to fall on deaf ears as well, because right after a few days of Ramesh Pawar's contract ending, BCCI did put out a position open for head coach. And irrespective of the kind of World Cup India had or the lead up they had to the World Cup, winning multiple games, even beating a side like Australia in a world tournament, it simply wasn't enough given all of the fiasco that had taken place. There was no clean ending, there was no apology, no headlines, no conclusion whatsoever. And more importantly, Ramesh Pawar stepped down from the position of coach. The coaching staff changed. Mithali Raj and Harmanpreet Kaur still went on to play for India for multiple years together, but 2019 was the last time that Mithali Raj would feature in a T20 international. It is a rather dark blip in Indian women's cricket history and something that a lot of people will talk about over the years. Yet it is a stark reminder of how important it is for team environments to be right, because it ultimately does affect the kind of performance and the bonds that you have in the squad. And looking back at these things, it was definitely one of the more difficult chapters in Indian women's cricket history, but at the same time it was also a year where our T20 squad did really well. Easily one of the best years that we've had as a T20 side in women's cricket. And honestly, that's all there is to it. If you've liked this video, definitely hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, share this with your friends and leave your comments down below on what you remember from that particular time. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.